At 1:42 a.m., the depot printer spits "Last ticket, Bay 7." The route on the slip hasn't run in 2 months. The chain at Bay 7 doesn't move. The validator chirps anyway. Hey everyone, tonight's true stories stay as they happened. Real times, real places. Grab a blanket, keep the volume low and settle in. Before we start, tell us your city and the time on your screen. What are you listening on? iPhone, Android, TV, car, or earbuds? If this keeps you company, hit subscribe when we're done. New stories roll in nightly. All right, let's begin. He likes depots after midnight. The big room finally tells the truth about its size. Benches stop pretending to be for people and go back to being plastic that remembers heat. He slips his sleeve over the handle of the side door, turns the key slow so the latch won't shout, and shoulders in with the kind of care you save for sleeping rooms. Air meets him that's part old coffee, part winter rain that never quite made it inside. It isn't cold, not warm, honest air that minds its job. He sets the flashlight on the counter, but doesn't turn it on. Eyes first, tools later. The ticket window glass shows his outline and the row of stools behind him. The open-closed sign hangs in the middle, the way tired things hang. He straightens it without flipping it, just to make it look like it belongs. The ticket printer sits square on its rubber feet, little green eyes steady and boring, how machines should be when the city's asleep. He takes the loop he always takes, restroom doors propped with wedges that have learned their angles, the mop sink room left how he left it, hose coiled, bucket empty, handle leaned so it won't teach the drywall a dent. He presses 2 fingers to the soda machine's front and gets back the right kind of hum, the kind that says a compressor is earning its paycheck and not trying to be interesting. He palm checks the timetable stand. Metal is cold in the way metal is, not the kind of cold that sticks. At the platform door, he sets his hand flat on the push bar, then steps back so he won't collect the outside on his clothes. Through the glass, yellow line crisp on wet boards, the bay numbers like neat teeth. No bus backs breathing steam, no driver scanning the empty for a last person. He tags the chain through the latch plate the way he always does, quiet, no show, and leaves it slack enough the door can remember open and keep closed at the same time. He moves through the seating like you talk around someone who's on the phone. Bench 1, bench 2, bench 3. He taps each with 2 knuckles. Sound comes back hollow the same way 3 times, which is how you know a room isn't inventing new moods for you. On bench 2, he presses a palm where someone's shoulder would have been if they had waited longer. Less cold than the rest by a thumb's width. He files it without building it into anything. Trash can liner lip gets a tidy tug. The lost and found bin wears the same 2 umbrellas and the scarf that never leaves. He folds the scarf once more so it won't make strangers feel like a story. He picks a coffee cup off the floor by Bay 3 and gives it the courtesy of checking for weight. Empty. The rim is less cold than the counter. He sets it upside down on the drip tray like it meant to live there. He stands still in the middle, lets his breathing show him if the room is holding its own breath. It isn't. Sound sits in layers. Exit sign buzz under the lights, soda machine note, a single drip he can place without looking. Near Bay 3, where the gutter outside forgets to be good. He doesn't chase it. Drips that keep time are part of how night proves it's working. He slides back behind the counter. The stool gives one small scrape that sand remembers but tile forgives. His forearm rests along the laminate edge that always keeps a little chill even in July. He touches nothing electric. He just watches the big clock he never trusts and the smaller one in his chest he always does. He tells the room what he tells every room when it's his. Routine first. Then he waits one heartbeat past comfort, so the building can decide whether it wants to be only a building tonight. He starts the loop he could do blind, slow on purpose, so the room can keep up. Counter first. He squares the stapler, lines the pen parallel to the edge, nudges the rubber foot on the printer so it sits flat. He doesn't press any buttons. Machines behave better when you don't give them excuses. He palms the glass on the ticket window, cool with that faint indoor film buildings get at night. He wipes a little half moon with the side of his sleeve, not to clean, just to make the glass remember it's being watched. The open-closed sign hangs just off level. He taps it once and it decides to be straight. Good. Across the floor, he takes the center aisle between benches like a bus, rolling dead through a wash bay, slow, straight, nothing extra. He taps bench 1 with 2 knuckles, hollow, honest. Bench 2 gets the same. Bench 3, closer to the outside door, comes back a shade less sharp, like plastic that met a coat not long ago. He lays a palm there and lets the surface tell him a tiny story. Less cold by a breath, not warm, not news. He leaves it there in his head without giving it a job. Trash cans next. He pulls the loose liner lip into a clean cuff so nobody has to look at it. The floor around them is a good kind of dirty. Dust that minds its corner, one leaf that got lost and quit. He toes the leaf to the door seam, not out, just near where leaving lives, restrooms. He pushes both doors with his sleeve and holds them on the wedge with his shoe while he listen checks. Fan steady. No drip inside. The drip he knows is the one out by bay 3. He sets paper straight without counting it and snaps the light off to let that room belong to itself again. By the coffee station, he unsnaps the empty pot, tips it for ghosts of weight, snaps it back. He picks up a cup and tests the rim with 2 fingers. Less cold than the counter again. He flips the stack so the neat edge faces the room. People respect faces. He glides the mop closet door until the magnet catches and the handle doesn't kiss drywall. His hand runs the length of the cord loop for the buffer. No knots, no surprise hooks. He taps the shelf with the spare bulbs. They answer glass true. He doesn't take any. He likes spares better when they stay spares. At the platform door, he stops like it's a person. Through the glass, slick boards, yellow line bright like paint that learned manners. He slips the chain with one hand, opens the door a hand's width to let night say its piece, and closes it back to almost, so the latch knows it was invited and still chose yes. He stands with one shoe in, one out, breathing the wet iron the rails make when they remember rain. No engine, no brake hiss. Just the big empty a depot earns after the last run. Back inside, he checks the timetable stand. The top sheet shows yesterday. He lifts one corner, floats the page, and lets it settle so the date doesn't feel scolded. He presses 2 fingers to the metal edge. Cold, normal. He likes normal when it holds still. He walks the far wall where the posters live, lost cat that looks smug, flu-shot reminder, a charity flyer that always slides low. He pushes that one up with the back of his hand until the thumbtack bites what it's meant to bite. He steps back and makes the line of bottoms even with a thumbnail's worth of air under each. Lines keep people calm. They keep him calm too. He stops in the middle of the room and lets his body be the sensor he trusts. Hums stack the way they should. Soda machine note, exit sign buzz, something small ticking in the ceiling that isn't a problem yet. He listens past them for diesel through concrete and hears nothing he can use. Good. He goes back behind the counter and sets both hands palm down on the laminate. It keeps its little chill like always. He looks at the clock he doesn't trust and counts the beat he does. The room has given him its first answers. doors, benches, paper, air. He nods once, the kind of nod that means we're in business, and lets the next minute come to him instead of the other way around. The printer quit clicking, but the paper curls still held a warm bend, like fingers had just let go. He set the last ticket, Bay 5, 1240, on the counter and watched the ink dry flat. No drafts, no fans, just the soda machine humming and the exit sign's lazy buzz. He told himself to log it later and stepped through the swinging half door into the maintenance hallway. The floor back here always felt colder, thin tile over concrete that never warmed up. A single strip light ran the corridor, and one section flickered just enough to make shadows crawl forward and then back. He paused at the break room window. A microwave clock showed 12:41, steady green. The vending machine inside had a red sold-out light on G5. Someone had pushed G5 a lot tonight. The button face was duller than the rest. He tapped his ring of keys against his leg, a quiet habit. The sound filled the hall and came back softer. The first door on the right was lost and found. He unlocked it and eased the door open with a shoulder. Smell of old coffee, damp gloves, cheap perfume baked into scarves. The metal rack held the usual: umbrellas like black ribs, a guitar case with a snapped handle, a box of gloves without mates. On the middle shelf sat 3 ticket stubs rubber-banded together. He turned the top one over. Route number printed in purple ink. 17 WL, River Spur. 17! West hadn't run in 2 months since the bridge work. He put the stub back where it had been and stepped out, locking the door from habit. The motion sensor down the hall pinged with a small electronic chirp. A second light woke up over the mop sink and lit the tiled cove. No draft came with it, no footfalls. He moved that way anyway because standing still made it worse. Past the cove, the hallway opened into the service bay vestibule. A narrow window looked out onto the platform. He cupped his hands to the glass. The platform lamps threw a tinfoil brightness on the painted lines. Bay 5 had its chain looped. Bay 7's padlock hung from the hasp, but wasn't clicked. He tried to remember if he'd run that chain himself, or only checked it with a glance. It was easy to believe the shape of a habit counted as the habit. He reached for the two-way clipped on his belt. The radio screen showed a single bar and no channel name, an old glitch. He toggled it off and on. It beeped alive, squawked, then settled. Front to yard, confirm bays 5 through 9 secure. He tried. The ceiling swallowed his voice. The radio stayed dry and quiet. In the quiet he heard something else, a soft murrup, like a validator taking a card in the lobby. He stood a moment longer to be sure he'd really heard it. Then he went back the way he'd come, past the mop sink and the break room and the stubborn light segment. He made himself walk at a normal pace. At the corridor corner he stopped again and listened. The validator sound came a second time, same short tone, followed by a tiny motor whir. The ticket printer's cutter had that same sound when it kissed the paper. When he pushed through the swinging half door into the lobby, the room looked unchanged. Benches empty, schedules butterflied under the plexiglass. The soda machine showed $1.75 in blue. At the counter, the ticket he'd left lay where he'd set it. Next to it, the printer's mouth held a fresh white tongue, ink still wet. Bay 7, 12:42, River Spur. The clock over the door agreed with the time. The chain on Bay 7 in the window's reflection agreed with nothing. He slid the fresh print from the slot and held it by the corner so the ink wouldn't smear. Bay 7, 12:42, River Spur. The letters looked honest. The printer was not a machine that joked. He set the slip beside the first ticket and lifted the counter flap. The hinge complained, a small groan that sounded louder than it should. He clicked the deadbolt open on the glass door to the platform and stepped into the grainy cold. Outside, the depot air had that wet metal taste. Lamps on the canopy buzzed in their housings, a soft, stinging sound that matched the tick in his ears after long shifts. The platform paint, numbers in white, arrows in yellow, sat bright and simple under the light. He counted the bays, 5 chained, 6 with a sag in its link, 7 with the chain draped and the padlock hanging, jaw open, tongue of steel catching the light. He reached out and took the lock in his palm. It was not warm, not cold either, just the same temperature as the night, which somehow felt worse. He brought the loose ends together and clicked it shut, not through the chain, but just to hold it. Then he examined the hook. The chain hadn't been snapped or cut. It looked as if it had simply been lifted off and let fall. He crouched to see the concrete at the bay line. Oil freckles, a gum smear, a small crescent of dried mud. Old, pale. No fresh tracks, no heel marks dragging grit. If someone had stepped down off the curb, they had done it carefully or long ago. He stood and glanced along the drive lane where coaches pulled through in daylight. The asphalt looked empty, that special after-hours empty that made space feel bigger than it was. A breeze slipped under the canopy and flipped the corner of a taped flyer on the pillar by bay 7. He smoothed it down. The flyer was the old detour notice for Route 17W, River Spur, suspended until bridge work complete. The month printed at the bottom was 2 months back. He had meant to pull those down last week. He pressed his thumb along the tape, then drew it away slow. Glue strings thinned and broke like spider thread. His radio gave a soft carrier hiss in his hand. He thumbed the side key. "Front a yard," he tried again, keeping his voice even. "I've got a chain loose at bay 7. Any movement logged on West Gate?" He released the key and heard only the hum of the canopy lamps and, deeper, the city's sleep noise. Far tires, a late siren that never came closer. He stepped to the curb and leaned out to look past the canopy edge at the street. The traffic light on 3rd cycled on an empty intersection. Red, green, yellow, all for nobody. A bus number plate lay face down near the storm drain, the kind mechanics clip to a bumper during service. He flipped it with his toe. Not a number, just a blank with magnet strips. It could have blown there weeks ago. He told himself that twice. Back at the bay, he pulled the chain up and set it through the hook where it belonged. He did not lock it. That would mean fetching the master key for this loop from the office, and he didn't want the walk away from whatever this was. He gave the chain a test tug. It held with the cheap, rattly sound he knew. The validator ping came again, faint, from inside, the quick little chirp of a card read, followed by the cutter's polite snip. He turned, saw the lobby light steady through the glass, and for a second caught his own outline doubled in the reflection. Him on the platform and another him inside, slightly out of step. He pushed the door, went back through and crossed to the counter. The printer's mouth showed a 3rd slip halfway out, like it hadn't made up its mind. He drew it free. Bay 7, 12:44, River Spur. The clock above the schedules agreed. The padlock on the window's reflection hung closed now, right where he'd left it. Between his hands on the counter, a dull smear of grit lay in a curve, as if a coin had been slid in a tight loop and lifted. He slid both new slips under the counter glass like he was filing them where they couldn't blow away, then took the narrow hall left of the public window toward dispatch. The badge reader there always lagged a beat. Tonight, it took 2. A green LED finally winked, and the door thunked open on the same dull carpet he'd walked thin over the years. Coffee smell had settled into it long ago. So had winter salt. The wall clock above the corkboard said 12:47. The second hand twitched, then moved clean. The dispatch terminal woke from its grey saver with a key tap. A half-size window lingered in the corner. Route status. Last update, 22:03. He clicked it. A table filled in, active, idle, suspended. 17 West showed suspended in yellow with a note 2 months old about the bridge closure and a hot link to a PDF he'd read 10 times. No override, no pilot, no test coach, nothing scheduled. He tried the cancellation screen anyway, a habit like checking a deadbolt twice. The system chirped, route already in suspend state. It felt like arguing with a sign. He brought up cameras, the depot's grid tiled across the monitor, lobby, bays, yard, west gate, back lot. Cam 7, the platform slice where Bay 7 sat, loaded slow, then sharpened into that bleach-bright view under the canopy. Chain up, padlock hanging gentle. He watched for 30 seconds, then longer. No drift, no shadow. The picture had that digital stillness that can fake quiet. He switched to West Gate, closed, bar down, chain through the stanchion, a sliver of 3rd Street light reflected in the gate's crossbar. He rode the cameras around once more and felt foolish for holding his breath. On the counter behind him, a narrow adding machine had a spooled audit tape from earlier runs. He tore off the tail and checked the imprint. Ticket IDs, bay numbers, times. 12:40, last ticket, Bay 5. 12:42, Bay 7, River Spur. 12:44, Bay 7, River Spur. The line spacing looked even, machine neat. No Clark code next to the entries, just the house code the system used when nobody was signed in. He turned to the terminal and checked the user pane. His login was active. Another line below it showed window 2, signed in, idle, 182 meninas. He stared at that. Window 2 had been dark since 9. He went to ask a question he didn't want to form and typed, "View." The pane blinked and replaced itself with a system prompt. Station locked. It had the tone of a closed door. He picked the phone. Landline tone came warm in his ear, a steady, clean hiss he liked. He dialed yard, then gate. Both rings went long and ended in voicemail. He set the handset down and it rocked in its cradle, not quite settled, then found the nest with a soft plastic click. From the lobby, through 2 doors, came a small metallic circle, coin on laminate. He heard it roll, slow, making a round, scraping song, then stop. He told himself the soda machine had paid itself change for nothing. His radio hissed again, this time a small texture burst that felt shaped like wind through a fence. He pressed the side key. "Copy any yard traffic," he said, even though he knew nobody was on. He listened to his own breath for 2 counts and let go. The PA panel on the wall lit a single red LED. He hadn't touched it. A relay somewhere thunked. The ceiling speaker in dispatch woke with a low bed, the hum that means the channel is open. No announcement followed. The red LED stayed on. He stepped close, put a finger to the talk bar without pressing it, and felt the faintest warmth under the plastic, as if someone had just used it. Back in cameras, cam 7 flicked, just once, a thin grey tear down the frame like old tape. When the picture steadied, the chain still hung right, the padlock still easy in its loop. But in the reflection on the bay's plexiglass route sign, a smear of white lengthened and shortened. Headlights do that. Only the drive lane behind the camera was empty, and the west gate on the other tile showed no car. He leaned in until pixels turned into little blocks. The smear thinned further, as if whatever made it had eased away, like a bus nosing out of a mirror and back into nothing. He left dispatch with the PA's red LED still glowing like a small eye and followed the short corridor to the ticket windows. Window 1 showed his own counter, stapler, pen tray, the hole punch with its catcher full. Window 3 was dark, stool up under the ledge. Window 2, the one the system swore was signed in, had its shade half lowered, the edge caught on a bent clip, so it hung with a crooked mouth. He unlocked the side gate and slipped behind the glass. The booth held that closed room smell, paper dust, a little old coffee in the grout lines. He touched the monitor's spacebar with his knuckle. It woke without asking for a password. Sales. Window 2 filled the screen. A blinking cursor waited in the field for card tap or cash. In the bottom corner, a tiny history pane showed the last 3 entries. 1242, Bay 7, River Spur, Eswiz. 1244, Bay 7, River Spur, Eswiz. 1250, Bay 7, River Spur, Sis. The quotes around SIS were the house way of saying no Clark code attached. It looked clean, like a report would accept it without asking questions. The thermal printer in this booth had its own role. He lifted the lid. The paper's top edge still held a curve from heat. He touched the curl with the back of a finger. Barely warm, but not nothing. In the trash ring under the counter, the bag's thin plastic clung to the can's seam as if it had been lifted and dropped. He glanced at the floor. No mud, no damp, no confetti of salt. A coin sat near the stool's wheel, edge up in the notch between tiles, like it had been spun and left where it lost its nerve. He checked the cash drawer. Latched. He keyed it open because the sound would be normal. The bell tinged and the spring arms looked right. Singles banded, fives straight. The drawer shut with that wooden slide thump the booth had always made. He listened to the room give back to quiet. On the glass, at customer level, 3 smudges caught the light, small ovals as if fingertips had pressed while a face leaned close. He raised his own hand to compare, his spread wider. These looked narrow, child small, or glove tight. He wiped one with the edge of a receipt, and it faded to nothing, leaving a clean arc you could miss if you didn't know to look. He pulled the incident log from under the counter. The green ledger still carried the break room coffee ring from last year. He flipped to a fresh line and wrote slow, the way they taught. 0051, Window 2 active, W.O. Clark. 17W, tickets printing with SYS code, Bay 7 chain rehung. He lifted the pen and listened. The hum under the booths had a steady machine tone, the kind you stopped hearing until you left and noticed its absence. Above him, the ceiling speaker made a small throat noise. 3 soft chimes followed. Old tone, the pre-recorded file they retired when the software update came. Then a voice, not a person live voice, but the depot's canned announcement voice from years back, rounded at the edges. Now boarding, River Spur, Bay 7, please have exact fare ready. The playback warbled on the last word, like a tape that had been stretched and let go. The PA light in dispatch wasn't visible from here. He didn't need to see it to know it would be read. He pressed his palm to the glass hatch and pushed it up. The lobby looked the same as 10 minutes ago. Benches plain, soda machine blue, schedules under plexiglass like pinned butterflies. But the sound had changed the room. It carried a shape now, a set of invisible lines, the way a bus pulling in made air tilt even before you heard the brakes. He set the ledger on the ledge and stepped out to the lobby because staying behind glass felt like pretending. Halfway to the door, the validator at the standby kiosk chirped, and a tiny motor snipped. The little screen pulsed a line he had to get close to see. River Spur. 1 admit. The printer spat a narrow tongue of thermal paper without being asked. He caught it by reflex. 1251, Bay 7, River Spur. The clock over the schedules clicked its second hand into place and agreed. From the platform side of the glass came a new sound, far but shaped, like a long vehicle easing weight onto a brake. He pushed through the glass again, and the platform's cold put a film on his teeth. The canopy lamps felt louder now, each ballast a wasp in a jar. At bay 7, the chain he'd set through the hook sagged an inch lower than before, not fallen, just eased, the way a thing relaxes when weight has left it. He put 2 fingers under the links and lifted. They rattled like dry keys, no fight in them at all. The air by the curb carried a smell he knew from other years and other shifts. Diesel that had already thinned, warmed rubber, a faint bite like pennies warmed in a hand. He stood still with his boot toes just kissing the yellow paint and felt for vibration through the concrete. Nothing steady, but something ghosted, an almost thrum that lived at the edge of noticing, as if the platform itself remembered the last bus that idled here. From the drive lane came a sound his ears recognized before his head caught up. A soft, 2-part sigh, the kind a coach makes when it kneels. He looked right and left. The lane held only dark and the seam where older asphalt met newer in a shallow scar. The sigh faded into a hush that could have been night breathing. He glanced up at the bay sign. Behind the plexiglass, the paper card's block print said the same as it always had. Bay 7 in thick black. But the reflection in the plexi, his own shape, and the canopy picked up a smear of white again, long and thin. He moved his head. The line moved too, not like light, but like something passing just out of frame. He told himself it was the ceiling tube behind him throwing a bar into the plastic. He set a palm flat on the curb. Cold concrete gave nothing back. He raised his radio anyway. "Front at bay 7, he said, keeping the words even. "Audible air dump at platform, no visual." He waited. The speaker gave him a small static prairie, and then quiet, as if the signal had to cross too much empty to find someone. On the concrete near the chain post lay a quarter. He knew it hadn't been there a minute ago. It sat on its face, stateside up, a neat ring of silt around the edge like it had been pressed into damp, though the night wasn't damp. He tapped it with a knuckle. It slithered a short circle, making a dry scrape, and stopped with Washington staring ceiling-ward. Against the pillar, the old detour flyer lifted one corner again, a small flap like a fish gill. Behind him, through the lobby glass, the validator chirped and the cutter snipped. He didn't turn right away. He made himself look left toward the west gate, bar down, chain through, 3rd Street light still treating nobody to red, green, yellow on schedule. He turned then, slow, and saw the little kiosk screen pulsing a second line, River Spur, to admit. The printer left a second slip half-tongued until the motor finished the cut. The PA, wherever the system kept its old voice now, ran the boarding call again, the one with the rounded tape edges. "Now boarding, River Spur, Bay 7. Please have exact fare ready." The ready wobbled, a tired rubber band note. He felt the announcement lay itself over the platform like lines on paper, the invisible lanes people walk without thinking when a bus actually pulls in. He found his own feet setting in those lanes, leaving the middle for a coach that wasn't there. He said the thing you say because it is what keeps the night square. 17 West is suspended, he told the air. Bridge closure, no service. His voice came back off metal and paint. Nothing answered. A long pulse of quiet set down, warm as a breath that wasn't wind, sweeping the front of his jacket like a coach, easing by very close. He did not step back. When it passed, the chain at bay 7 lifted a half-inch and fell, a single link's worth of motion. He could have sworn it, and he hated that word, so he stared until his eyes watered. On the curb line, where bus tires always rubbed, the pale dust lifted and dropped in a long arc, leaving a cleaner crescent like a finger had traced the path. From the kiosk, without a hand near it, the little screen ticked to a third line, River Spur, 3 admit, and the printer waited, polite for someone to take what it had made. He folded the 3 slips together and slid them into his breast pocket the way he kept keys, flat, counted, real, then angled off the platform toward the west gate. The drive lane's asphalt had cooled into that late-night hardness that throws back sound. His steps ticked. The bar at the gate stood down as it should, chain through, lock set. The little orange box that sensed metal over the loop wore a film of dust, a thumbprint swiped across its top from some afternoon check. He leaned close and watched the status LED. Green steady meant idle. It was steady. He tapped the box with a knuckle. The plastic answered with a hollow note, and nothing changed. A chalk line ran across the lane just inside the gate, the mechanic's way of seeing if a coach rolled after hours. He knelt and put 2 fingers to it. The line broke under his touch and came away on his skin the way dry chalk does, no smear from a tire. A small pebble lay in the chalk, half pressed like it had thought about a weight, and then decided not to remember. He set it out of the line and stood. From the lot behind the building came a soft ticking, not the canopy's electrical buzz, but the slow ping of metal cooling. Coaches make that sound after a run, heat leaving brake drums, skin shrinking back into itself. He cut between the service bay wall and the dumpsters toward the back lot to tell his head the sound belonged to something he could point at. The back lot sat darker, 3 coaches nose in, their numbers stenciled high like quiet house numbers. The nearest, 1423, wore a fresh soap arc where someone had tested a wand and put it away. He laid a hand on the side panel out of habit, cold, taking night evenly. He did the same on 1419, then 1398. All 3 felt like the same square of air. He went to the driver door on 1423 and tried the latch. It didn't move. The coach was off and dead-bolted. Through the glass he could see the fare box asleep, little amber on the reader dark. On the floor just past the first step, though, a coin lay against the ribbed mat like it had been set down, not dropped. He knew better than to unlock a coach alone after hours for something that might have been there since noon. So he let it be and stepped back down. At the far fence, the riverside, a line of weed tops leaned and stayed, as if a draft had gone through and then changed its mind about coming back. He listened for water and traffic. The bridge had been quiet for months. The detour sent everything wide. The night put nothing across the fence but insect hiss and a far dog. He pulled his radio, thumbed the key. "Backlot check," he said. "Audible cooldown pings present. No hot skins. Westgate loop, idle." It helped to hear the words leave. The reply was the same gentle prairie hiss that had become the night's default answer. On his way back along the service wall, he passed the time clock by the employee door. Its little LCD showed 1:01 in unbothered grey. Below it, the sign-in sheet for cleaners hung on a nail. 3 names from earlier shifts, a blank line under tonight's column, and then a new entry in a tight, careful hand. R. Spur, 051. He stood very still and let his eyes do the doubting before his mouth could. The pen on the twine knocked once against the metal and went quiet. He took the sheet down because paper in a pocket felt safer than paper on a wall, and slid it behind the tickets against his chest. At the corner, where the service wall met the platform vestibule, he stopped. The canopy hummed its same note. The validator inside the lobby chirped again, brief, tidy. He didn't turn. He counted to 5 the way you count before lifting a lid in a kitchen to see if a pot is about to boil over. The chirp didn't repeat. The printer's tiny cutter gave one kiss, and then silence. He stepped back into the vestibule and looked through the narrow window at Bay 7. The chain hung where he'd left it, gentle and nothing. But along the curb, in the pale dust on the tire path, a new mark had joined the clean crescent he'd noticed earlier. A second arc, shallower, tracing beside the first, like a coach had adjusted its angle by inches and settled. He put his palm to the glass and felt exactly what he expected. Cold, quiet, and the sense a large thing had recently made room in front of him without needing permission. He eased back into the lobby and let the glass door close, slow behind him so the latch didn't fuss. The room held its same quiet furniture, benches, map, soda blue. The clock over the schedules blinked its red dots between 1:04 and 1:05 with that small, private pulse the night likes. He stood by the kiosk where the validator lived. Its little screen had gone to idle, a soft logo that slid from left to right and back again, like a fish behind frosted glass. He pulled the printer lid and looked at the roll. Plenty of paper. The spindle turned freely. He ran a fingertip along the cut edge. The fibers felt warm, not hot, just touched, as if the blade had done its neat kiss 1 minute ago, and then folded its hands. He checked the floor around the post base. In the grout seam, a thin braid of black grit curved in a quarter circle and stopped dead at the stand's shadow. No shoe tread broke it, no heel nick. He pictured coins rolled in idle lines. He pictured a fare box printing little receipts no one ever kept. System test, he told himself out loud, because words made shapes you could handle. Loop firing, legacy audio stuck in memory. He wanted that to be the whole story. He set his radio on the kiosk shelf, used both thumbs to hold the power key. The screen went dark and came back to its start tone. He felt better for 5 seconds. From the ceiling, the speaker gave a hushed breath, and then the old boarding line again. "Now boarding, River Spur, Bay 7, please have exact fare ready." The wobble in ready had a smile in it he'd never heard when the system was new. He walked to the PA panel behind the counter and looked at its red LED. It was lit. He pressed the talk bar and kept it pressed. The channel hum dipped as if it had stepped aside. He said, "Clear and simple, 17. West is suspended. Do not board. Bridge closed." He released the bar. The hum came back. The LED stayed red like a good lie. He took the 2 admission slips the kiosk had printed, 1251 and 1255, and laid them by the first 3 from Bay 7. 5 white tongues in a row. He wrote numbers next to them with his pen so the line would feel owned. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He looked up at the benches, silly as it was, and counted heads that weren't there. Past the glass, the platform air shifted like a big coat being shaken out. He went to the door and put his hand on the bar, but did not push. Through the tinted pane, the canopy lamps sat in a patient row. He tracked his gaze along Bay 5, Bay 6, Bay 7. A pale smear slid across Bay 7's plexiglass sign like a reflection of a long thing passing. The chain did not move. The dust at the curb held 2 arcs now, nested, a parenthesis for an arrival. He returned to dispatch because screens make you pick sides. Cam 7 showed the same bright wash. He upped the gamma, dropped the saturation, the old trick to drag detail out of cheap sensors. The image went chalky and thin. On the curb line, the 2 clean arcs stood out like 2 deliberate erasures. In the reflection on the plexi, a longer pale bar eased forward and then eased back, as if a coach were rocking that last inch to a stop. He clicked yard, then backlot, then Westgate. Yard, still. Backlot, the 3 noses the same, numbers asleep. Westgate, bar down, chain through, 3rd Street dutiful. He went back to Cam 7 and left it. If you watch long enough, a picture will do you favours or harm. He let it try. The ceiling speaker coughed once, not the old tape voice, another sound, thinner, like a door chime hit through a wall. He had heard that chime 1,000 times from a first step up. 2 tones, not proud, just polite. He did not move. In the lobby, the validator chirped, and the cutter touched paper. He heard the little tongue slide out and didn't go claim it. The clock at the schedules clicked to 1:07. The red dots blinked. He imagined where a bus door would be if a bus door were there, left front of bay 7, half a step from the chain post. He imagined a hand at the rail, a foot on ribbed rubber. He imagined the old way the fare box used to clear when someone dipped a coin cup. Small whir, shy beep, roll print. On cam 7, for a breath long enough to doubt, the pale smear on the plexiglass made a shape with edges. He leaned in, pixels breaking under his eyes. The shape had the right kind of square, the kind that sits where a windshield sits. It held, then thinned, then let go. Down the hall, somewhere he couldn't name, a metal door closer sighed and clicked, as if a weight had passed through, and the spring had done what it was built to do. He set his palm on the dispatch counter. The laminate was cool and said nothing back. On the blotter by his hand, the 5 small tickets made a neat row that did not look like an accident. Out on the platform, the invisible lanes lay waiting the way chalk lines wait for shoes. He took the long way back to the lobby, as if a circle could make the facts sit down. The corridor's bad light winked once and held. At the break room window, the microwave clock read 1:09 in steady green, which felt almost kind. He paused at the lost and found again without meaning to. The rubber-banded stubs on the middle shelf waited where he'd left them. He lifted the top one and turned it over to prove paper was still only paper. Purple ink, 17W, River Spur. The ink had bled a hair into the fibers the way old stamps do. In the lobby, the validator had left a fresh slip without permission. He didn't pick it up. He laid his palm on the kiosk post instead, feeling for the little motor's warmth. A thread of heat lived under the paint. The screen showed idle. He touched the Help key to pull a settings pane, but the interface he knew didn't arrive. A spare menu came instead, grey, unskinned, like a page from an old manual. Farebox test, counter, print, last. He didn't touch any of it. He backed out and the normal screen returned, shy about the trick it had played. He found a quarter in his pocket, different from the one by the chain post. He knew his own coin by the nick through the eagle, then stood with it pinched flat between forefinger and thumb. System test, he said again, not to bless it, but to give his hand something normal to obey. He set the coin on the kiosk shelf. He had no reason to drop it into anything. The validator wasn't a fare box, and he wasn't here to feed ghosts. Still the coin stood there, patient and round, reflecting the canopy light in a dull ring. From the ceiling, the old boarding line rolled once more, softer now, like a door closing in a farther room. Now boarding, River Spur, Bay 7. Please have exact fare ready. The wobble in ready had less smile, more tired tape. He walked to the glass and watched Bay 7. The curb dust kept its 2 clean parentheses. Between them, the paler concrete of the tire rub flared and dimmed, a brightness trick like underwater light. He saw it, and then he didn't, which is how seeing works when there is nothing to see. He went behind the counter to dispatch because numbers can catch what eyes spill. Cam 7, no figure, no swing, only the chalky curb line and the nested arc. He opened the event log and typed, because typing made proof. IT 110, legacy. PA loop persists. Kiosk shows ghost menu. Validator issuing admits unsupervised. He saved. The system accepted the line without telling him it was being dramatic. When he came out again, the validator had printed another tongue of paper and left it to cool. The kiosk screen pulsed a new line. River Spur. 4. Admit. The quarter he'd set on the shelf lay flat where he'd left it, but wore a faint crescent smear through its dust, as if a finger had slid it to feel the weight, and then slid it back to the same place. He reached the same finger out and traced the crescent. Grit lifted, and the skin on his fingertip took on that penny bite. He lifted the fresh slip and read it because that's what you do with printed things. 111 Bay 7 Riverspur. The clock above the schedules clicked to 111 like a witness with no interest in stories. He laid the slip with the others and put a number 6 by it to keep his small math tidy. He didn't like 6. It made a shape on the page like a door swung almost shut. From the platform came that two-part sigh again, kneeling air finding its space in a bag. He felt it more than he heard it, a pressure change that moved the hair along his forearms under his jacket. He went to the glass and set his knuckles against it. The pain held the night's cold with its usual indifference. In the plexiglass of Bay 7's sign, the pale bar lengthened to the size a windshield would take if a windshield had bothered to show up, then shortened as if the bus had eased that bit, searching the sweet spot. He pressed the door bar and stepped out because standing in a room that knew about it wasn't better. The canopy buzz grew teeth. At the chain he stopped. The links had taken on a slow sway he could have blamed on breath, if breath made metal think. On the curb line, between the two marks, a third, shallower arc had started, faint as a first pencil. He crouched. The dust there had been lifted by nothing he could point at and then set down again, in a softer place, the way a heavy tire corrects a hand's worth and stops. Behind him, inside, the validator chirped, and the cutter kissed paper once more. He didn't turn. He watched the curb and counted air. When he finally stood, he felt the shape of the aisle that wasn't there set itself along his left shoulder and leaned forward without touching him, the polite pressure a stranger gives in a crowded coach when there's one last step to take before the doors close on time. The PA stayed quiet. The clock inside went to 1:12. He stayed with the chain a few breaths longer and then stepped left to where a front door would square with Bay 7's curb if a front door existed. The habit in his body made his feet stop in the right place, 1/2 step from paint, left shoulder angled to the aisle that wasn't. He raised his hand without quite knowing why and found it hovering where a rail would be, palm open, fingers crooked. He closed the hand, not touching anything, and set it down. From the far end of the canopy, metal clicked, 2 small tones an inch apart, like the soft latch in a folding door catching, then catching again. He looked that way and saw only the line of poles and the night river beyond the fence. The sound arrived again, closer this time, and stopped where he stood. He didn't move. He heard the quiet take a shape, a hollow just big enough for a person. A breath brushed past his left sleeve, the kind of moving air that belongs to people near each other who know their lanes. He did not step back. He let it pass and felt it again, near his knee, the height where a cloth bag would swing when someone turned a shoulder to clear a gap. In front of him, at curb edge, the dust lifted and settled twice, a careful heel and toe that left no print. The validator inside chirped, and the small motor kissed paper. He could have timed the world by that sound now. The ceiling speaker did not speak. A long, patient hush sat under the canopy, like the open space between 2 lines of a form. He eased the chain aside with one finger because the smallest motions felt permitted. The links knocked in a polite way and then were still. He leaned a bit over the curb and looked at the tire path. The 2 clean arcs had grown a third, light and shorter, the way a driver works a wheel when the angle is almost right. The bright paint at the bay number wore a new, thin, dark rub, as if a wide tire had breathed on it. He said, in a voice he tried to keep the size of the moment, "Bridge is still closed. 17 West is not in service." The canopy gave his words back like a form letter. He waited for the part where someone asked what to do, and he could explain detour routes and posted advisories. No one asked. A soft two-tone sounded at his right shoulder. The bell he knew from a front step, tapped by a careful shoe. He saw it without seeing it, a hand that didn't take the rail, a boot toe finding rubber ribs, a second foot that considered and then committed. He turned toward the glass because the room inside kept a record. The kiosk screen now pulsed, River Spur. 8. Admit. The slips lay in a small fan where he'd left them, edges already beginning to curl the way thermal does when it cools. He reached for the handle on the door to go claim them, then left his hand there a second, not pressing. Beyond Bay 7 toward Bay 9, a different sound alarmed the quiet, a light pull and a soft snap like fabric leaving a nail. He faced it and saw a corner of poster peeling on a pole 2 bays down, the detour notice older than today finally giving up. He watched it work itself free a quarter inch. A draft carried the loose edge toward him and then let it fall. He thought of a timetable held in a gloved hand. He pushed into the lobby. The room felt a degree warmer, though the thermostat had not moved. He set the new admits with the others, 7, 8 numbers, that did not stop anything. He wrote, 0115, platform shows control corrections, admit count increasing, unvoiced boardings implied. He hated implied enough that he underlined it and drew the line too hard. The PA panel's red LED went out without his help. For a beat, the ceiling was true quiet, not bedded by any line. Then the old voice returned, farther away than before, as if speaking from a coach with doors mostly closed. River Spur, Bay 7. The last words blurred in the seam, and the sound cut in the middle of its breath, the way a microphone does when a door seals. The lobby lights did not flicker. The clock slid to 1:16 and carried on. Out by the curb, the chain at Bay 7 lifted the smallest amount and settled, like a thank you no one had time to say. He stood with the pen still uncapped and watched the red LED on the PA stay dark, like a thing that had decided not to help anymore. The lobby carried that aftersound feeling, like a room that had just held a voice and was trying to lie about it. He capped the pen, lined it with the others in the tray, and let his eyes go where they wanted, to the kiosk screen. The idle logo had given way to numbers again. River Spur. 9, admit, then a soft pulse. 10, admit. The printer did its neat kiss twice, tongues of paper waiting for a hand that wasn't busy. He pressed the door bar. The platform air met him with a thinner diesel thread than before, less gasoline, more warmed metal, like a smell remembered in a coat. Bay 7's chain hung where he'd left it. The links had drawn still. He stepped to the curb. The dust curve showed the same parenthesis marks, only rubbed smoother now, the way a tire's first press gets buffed by the weight that follows. Down the drive lane, the night gave one of those long, empty spaces where a distant tire hiss could be anything. He listened past it and found a smaller thing. A click, pause click that belonged to door counters on older coaches. He had replaced one last winter. Little grey box the size of a notepad, wire run through the hinge. He heard it again, near as his elbow, only nothing touched him. He turned to the bay sign plexi and used it like a mirror, because mirrors tell on the world when the world won't stand still. His own outline held. Behind it, the pale bar that had lengthened and shortened all night took on a more stubborn shape, a rectangle with corners soft as breath on glass. He moved his head a touch. The rectangle kept its seat, the way a windshield would when it had nowhere else to go. 17 West is suspended, he said, not for argument now, but to keep the ground under the sentence. The canopy gave him back a smaller version, and then nothing. The validator inside chirped again, tidy, sure, and the cutter snipped once more. The kiosk screen through the glass clicked to 11 admit. He had never watched numbers grow and felt so little proof of people. He stepped off the curb 1 boot's width to look along the lane toward the west gate. Bar down, chain through, the orange loot box still wore its dust thumbprint. He could not make a bus fit between those facts. He set his heel back to paint. At his feet, against the bay stencil, a tiny smear of dark shone in a thin, uneven oval. He rubbed it with a thumb and smelled what he knew, a trace of axle grease that had found its way to the curb line in a place with no axle. He held his thumb up like a witness and then wiped it on the pocket seam where other nights had left their truth. He went into dispatch because a screen knows what a person can't hold. Cam 7 stayed chalk bright. On the curb edge, the smoother rub marked a truer arc, as if a driver had locked the wheel straight. He remembered an old trick and opened the audio pane for that camera. Most mics had died years back, but sometimes a sensor still carried room tone. He slid the gain. For a second he heard only hiss. Under the hiss, a breath of pulse, not a beat exactly, but a slow, even push, like air being managed by a compressor. It faded when he listened too hard and came back when he looked away. He typed because it kept hands from doing useless things. 0118, curb shows final alignment, faint grease present. Cam 7 audio bed suggests compressor tone, admits at 11. He saved. The cursor blinked like a tiny lighthouse and then sat still. When he returned to the lobby, the kiosk had advanced by its own patient math. 12, admit, then 13, while he watched. The slips lay in a spent fan now. He stacked them to keep the line from looking like a spill and numbered to 13 with his pen. The act felt like sweeping a step that kept collecting the same dust. From the ceiling came a sound so soft he almost missed it. 2 tones, not the old announcement, but the double ding he had always heard when a coach lifted from kneel and the suspension found its ride height. The platform air outside moved 1 degree cooler, a blanket pulled not off, but down. He walked back out and stood with the chain again, watching the arcs that said here and no farther. The dust within them gave a slow blur, a last breath out. Farther along the curb, 10 feet, maybe 12, a faint new crescent marked an exit line angled toward the drive. It was the kind of mark the front tire leaves when the rear decides. The validator did not chirp this time. The lobby clock turned to 1:20 without a sound. On the plexi of Bay 7's sign, the rectangle in the reflection grew thin enough to be only night again. He waited for the long sigh of doors sealing and heard only the canopy's patient wasps. Somewhere behind the wall, a relay clicked and stayed in, as if a circuit had chosen a side and would not be talked out of it. He set his hand flat on the chain and let the links cool under his palm the way rails cool after a train, clearly unused and somehow not at rest. He kept his palm on the chain until his hand learned its chill, and then let go. The air under the canopy had the blank, scooped-out feel a large thing leaves when it changes its mind about being here. He stepped to the curb again, toes on yellow, and traced the new faint crescent 10 feet down, the exit angle a front tire writes when a driver commits. It pointed toward the drive lane like a quiet arrow. Inside, the kiosk did not chirp. Silence had taken that job back. He walked to the glass to check anyway and caught the screen between blinks. River spur. 14, admit, then the number stalled, as if the count had stood up and smoothed its coat before leaving. The slips on the ledge lay in a tidy stack he didn't remember neatening. He put a thumb on their edges. The paper had cooled to the room. He cut for dispatch because his head needed a box with buttons. Cam 7 showed the same chalk-bright platform and the same nested arcs, only the third mark, the angle out, read a touch darker, like the sensor had decided to believe it. He pulled up the movement log out of habit, not hope. The system had grafted a line to the bottom of the table without asking him, 0121, Bay 7, trip open, route field, 17W, river spur, operator, SYS. He stared long enough to teach the letters not to mean anything, then read them again, and failed at that. He typed, hands slow, to keep the shape of things. 0122, system logged, trip open on suspended route. Platform shows exit arc, admits paused at 14. He hit save and the terminal accepted it with the meekness of a good clerk. From somewhere behind the wall, maybe the bay vestibule, maybe the hallway, came the briefest grind of a blower spooling and stopping. Coaches make that noise when a driver touches climate out of habit. It sounded like someone remembering where the switch was and then thinking better of it. He was moving before he decided to, out of the office, past window 2, through the lobby to the platform door. The night met him with a thinner thread of diesel and the faint, warm metal taste of a brake that had thought about being used. Along the curb, the new exit crescent sharpened a hair, a clean sweep through dust like a finger drawn and lifted. He walked the length from Bay 7 toward the drive, boots careful not to step through the line, the way you don't smudge wet paint, even if no one will see it. At the canopy's last pole before open air, a square of bus shadow that wasn't shadow lay on the concrete for an instant, the kind of darker that comes from something large, blocking light, and then moving. He blinked, and the square was just night again. He glanced toward the west gate. Bar down, chain through. The orange loot box's LED still said steady green, idle. A good answer to a different question. He went to the chalk line the mechanics kept by the gate and crouched. It had been whole 10 minutes ago. Now a soft brush had scored it, not a tire's blunt stamp, but a fine, even bite, as if chalk had let a weight pass without giving it the pleasure of a footprint. He touched the brake with a knuckle. Powder came away on his skin the same as before. He rubbed his fingers together and felt nothing that would change a report. Back in the lobby, the PA panel showed no red, yet the ceiling gave a sound like doors breathing against their seals, a patient inward, a patient out, and done. The old voice did not return. The clock slid to 1:23. He counted because counting makes time behave. 1, 2, 3, 4. No validator chirp, no cutter kiss. He looked at the kiosk anyway. The screen had left the idle logo for a page he had never seen outside training. Trip 17W, active, Bay 7, origin, 0121, farebox closed. The slashes where an operator number should sit stayed slashes. He reached to back out and the screen blinked itself to normal, almost shy about being caught. He set both hands on the counter to feel something furniture sturdy and found a curve of grit under his left palm, the exact shape a coin traces when it spins and dies. He splayed his fingers and the grit printed faint half-moons in his skin. Across the glass, his own reflection looked like a man who had stayed too late to watch a simple place become a complicated story. He wrote, because ink can lift a weight. No 124. Trip shows, active, farebox closed, Westgate chalk disturbed, no visual egress, platform air emptied. He underlined nothing. Out on the curb, the 3 arcs, arrival, settle, exit, held their shapes like a diagram drawn by someone patient. The chain at Bay 7 rested where he had left it, gentle, obedient, and useless. The station settled into a held breath that made the ordinary seem staged. He stood with both palms on the counter until the laminate gave him back its simple chill, then turned to the wall map behind the brochure rack. The River Spur line, 17W, ran in a neat blue from depot to riverfront, over the closed bridge, and out to the spur loop by the mills. He touched the bridge symbol with a knuckle. The plastic coating clicked, a tiny sound like glass cooling. The landline on the back shelf rang once. One dry bell, not enough to be a call exactly, then stopped. He lifted the handset anyway. Dial tone came clean in his ear, full of that civilized hiss that made machines feel civilized. He put it down, and the cradle clicked with the same unconvincing finality the night kept offering. On the kiosk, the idle screen blinked to a mode he hadn't asked for. Trip 17W, stop log. A thin list crawled up from the bottom, grey on grey, as if memory had decided to annotate itself. Origin, Bay 7, 0121, Fairgrounds, pass. Riverfront, pass. Bridge, closed. The last line jumped, corrected itself without his hand on any key. Bridge, pass. He reached to back out. The page flickered and hid, abashed under the familiar idle logo. He went to dispatch because hiding from a screen is worse than speaking to one. The terminal still held his last note. He pulled the vehicle positions pane he never used at night and watched the empty grid draw itself. 9 daytime routes, 2 night shuttles, 17W greyed out with its friendly suspended tag. For a half-second the tag lost saturation and 17W lit like a thing that had remembered its name. A dot bloomed near the river like a sigh under glass, then went out as if embarrassed by the attention. He didn't trust the camera microphone trick twice, but he slid the gain anyway. Hiss lived where hiss lives. Under it, a brief 2-tone chimed, polite, domestic, then a clatter of coins the way they sound in a farebox throat. Not separate, exactly, but a short, metallic river finding its bed. He typed, because he was the kind of man who typed when the floor moved. Il-126, ghost stop log, briefly visible, 17W pixel blink, near river, audio, farebox, coin fall, plus door chime. He saved. The cursor accepted his confession without judgment. In the lobby, the validator printer had behaved itself. No new tongue waited. The stack of admits he'd numbered to 14 sat square as a deck. He shuffled them once, paper talk, nothing more, to prove noise still belonged to him. On the ledge by the window, a bus timetable from spring leaned against the plexi. He slid it free and opened to 17W. First run, last run, times in neat columns. The 120 block wore a highlighter crescent from some other life. He put the booklet back where it had learned to lean. Out on the platform, the air had cooled the way pavement cools when a shadow leaves. He walked to Bay 7 and found the 3 arcs unchanged, diagram tidy and final. 10 feet beyond, that faint exit crescent had lengthened another inch, precise as ruled pencil. Past it, a thinner twin, a ghost of the ghost, angled the same way like a correction made by a careful hand. He kept his boots to the paint and did not step across the story. The west gate presented the same facts it loved. Bar down, chain through, loop box small and patient with its green. He let his eyes rest on the chain's hook, the cheap weld like a cold scar. A breeze reached under the gate and brought the river's flat water smell with the faintest sting of creosote from pilings that had no business talking to him from here. He pictured the bridge deck empty under the detour's authority. He pictured a coach finding a lane that no lane offered, the way water makes a path through grass by insisting. Back inside, the PA panel woke its red eye without the switch moving. The ceiling lifted a bed of air as if a microphone had been opened to a space with no one speaking. Then the old voice came, quieter than the last time, softened by distance or memory. Next, riverfront transfer. Not his system's cadence, older, slower, an audio file that should have retired when they retired transfers. The words bled at the edges and went thin in the middle, like sound run through cloth. He stood very still and heard a second sound ride under the first, air brakes letting go in 2 parts the soft, coiled gasp a driver gives the night before rolling. The kiosk did not print. The clock climbed to 1:28 and then 1:29 in tidy, uncaring clicks. He wrote again because a line on paper could be a fence. 0129. PA announces riverfront transfer. Air system sounds beneath. Platform marks unchanged. Exit line extends. West gate visually secure. He put the pen down. The room waited, a stage with its flats in place. In the glass, his reflection wore a jacket he recognized on a man he didn't, the version of himself who stands still while something decides if it's leaving for good or just teaching him how to watch. Out at Bay 7, the chain neither lifted nor fell. It had learned the night's trick of doing nothing that didn't look like something. He let the PA's bed die back to ceiling quiet and watched the kiosk like you watch a pot when you've already turned the burner off. The idle logo drifted left, then right, pretending to be nothing. He touched no keys. The screen blinked once, shy, and the grey page he hadn't asked for slid up again, as if it had been waiting under glass. Trip 17W. Stop log. The list walked itself one line at a time, polite as a receipt. Origin, Bay. 7:01:21, Fairgrounds, pass. Riverfront, pass. Bridge, pass. Mill Road, pass. Spur Loop, dwell. Dwell held for 2 beats, then grew a small tail of text. SU-132, Farebox open. He didn't breathe until it shut itself with a second click of type. 0133, Farebox closed. The page blinked, embarrassed by its own honesty, and hid. The idle fish came back and swam its easy lane. He kept his hands at his sides and counted his pulse until it lined up with the clock's red dots. At the counter, he stacked the admits again, though they were already tidy. Thumbs square to edge, corners tapped, because paper kindnesses were the only ones on offer. The landline on the shelf gave one dry ring, a throat clear, and stilled. He picked it up. Dial tone came sane and steady. He put it down and the cradle clicked. Somewhere in the building, a door closer sighed and found latch. The small metal yes of an invisible errand finished. He went to dispatch because a box with buttons can tell you how to stand. The camera grid held its postcards of stillness. Cam 7 stayed chalk bright, arcs fixed, the exit crescent a hair darker than before, as if the pixels had decided to finally believe the ground. He opened the vehicle positions pane again against his better judgment. The grey dot for 17W flickered into a ghost of presence out by the mills, exactly where the spur loop circle sat on the daytime map, then blinked away like a shy fish. He glanced at the event log. The system, dutiful and untroubled, had written 2 new lines on its own. EAT-132, box open. EAT-133, box close. He typed because ink could be a rope. 0133, stop log surfaced. Spur loop dwell, farebox cycle recorded. Depot remained secure. He saved the line and watched the cursor blink until it steadied him. Back in the lobby, the validator held its peace. No chirp, no kiss of paper. The kiosk screen wore its simple smile. On the ledge, a quarter lay where he'd left it earlier, only it had rotated a thumb's worth, the nick across the eagle now pointing toward the door. He touched the coin and found it room cool. On the floor by the kiosk's base, a tiny curve of grit traced a lazy C, the kind a coin leaves when someone tests its balance and lets it fall before it decides to spin. He pressed the door bar and stepped under the canopy. Night had shifted a fraction, less metal in the air, more river. The 3 arcs at Bay 7 held like chalk under clear varnish. 10 feet down, the exit crescent owned its darker line. Beyond that, and only if he didn't stare, a second faint sweep hinted farther out, the path a rear tire writes when the front already knows the way. He walked to the west gate because a fact you can touch beats 10 you can witness. Bar down, chain through. The orange loot box kept its green eye steady and uninterested. The chalk scratch across the lane wore the same fine bite as before, no heavier, no clearer, like a signature traced under tissue rather than inked on the page. He placed 2 fingers against the bar. Cold painted steel. Stillness that felt practiced. The PA woke itself without lighting the panel LED. Far away air rode the ceiling like someone putting a phone in a pocket while it was still on. Then that older voice arrived again, wrapped in cloth. Next, spur loop. The last word dragged 1 syllable long, as if tape had stretched a winter and then remembered itself. Under it, faint and exact, the double ding of doors opened, and then the same ding closed, 2 notes separated by the space of a foot on a ribbed step. He went back to dispatch to let the screen choose for him. The vehicle positions pane didn't honor him with another blink. The stop log didn't surface. The terminal clock added a minute and made no ceremony of it. He looked at Bay 7 on Cam 7 and thought of the long way the route took. Depot, fairgrounds, the Grey River, the deck they were still fixing, Mills asleep behind chain link, the loop that returned everything to the first part of a circle. In the lobby, the idle logo on the kiosk slowed its drift as if listening. The stack of admits numbered to 14 sat like a small book. He set his palm on the cover and felt the ordinary warmth paper collects when it has been near a person. The clock stepped to 1:34. Outside, a breath of night moved the loose corner of the detour flyer and laid it flat like a hand, smoothing a bed someone had just left. He stood with the stack of admits under his palm until his hand learned the paper's small warmth, then set them down in a cleaner pile than they needed. The kiosk wore its idle face. The PA stayed dark. The clock's red dots blinked their private blink and tipped to 1:35. He told himself that if a thing could go out, a thing could come back, and he went to the glass to see if the platform knew that rule. Bay 7 held steady. The 3 arcs at the curb, arrival, settle, exit, read like a tidy diagram a patient person had drawn. 10 feet down, the exit crescent had decided itself, a firm sweep. Beyond it, just faint enough to be a trick, a matching curve farther out pointed toward the lane, the way a rear tire follows the front when a coach turns for real. He pushed the door bar and stepped under the canopy because the room behind him did not have the air he needed. The night had thinned to river and metal, more memory than smell. Somewhere out there, a train 2 neighborhoods away tested a horn and thought better of it. He went to the chalk scratch by the west gate. The line had not been stamped through, only brushed, the same fine bite as before. The bar stood down, chain through. The orange loop box watched him with the steady green of a thing that only wakes for undeniable weight. Behind him, the ceiling in the lobby took a breath and held it. He knew that hold. He had heard it on late routes when a driver forgot to kill the PA and set the handset down on the shelf while easing into a stop. Then the old voice arrived, softer than soft, like sound remembering what it had been. Now approaching. Riverfront transfer. Not his cadence, not his file set. Something older, the pace of a winter day they don't run anymore. Under it, the small clatter of coins in a throat that didn't exist here. 3 notes. A draw sound, a door chime brushed twice. He went to dispatch because a square of pixels can make a person accept things. Cam 7 stayed chalk bright, arcs exact, nothing moving but the idea of movement. He opened the vehicle pane and made himself look only once. The grey dot for 17W flickered out by the river, dim as a thought, then blinked to the bridge and went thin, then brightened a thumb's worth over Mill Road, then hid again because that is what it liked to do. He didn't chase it. He wrote instead, Elo 136, PA, approaching riverfront, faint farebox, ghost position, flickers eastbound. Save. The terminal obeyed. Back in the lobby, the kiosk screen gave up pretending and let the grey page surface without him. Trip 17W. Stop log. The list walked upward in its small manners. Spur loop, depart 0135. Mill Road, pass, bridge, pass, riverfront, pass, fairgrounds, pass. He watched the line rise until it wrote a line he could swallow. Bay 7, dwell. The page held there, waiting to see if he would argue. He did not touch a key. The screen flinched and hid. The idle fish swam back across the glass with its little patience. He put his ear toward the ceiling because sometimes sound tells truth better than light. Far away in the building's bones came a two-part sigh, deeper than the kneel he'd heard earlier, the long, even exhale of doors finding seal, then the softer lift of a coach settling its weight to ride height. The PA panel's red LED did not light. The room learned the shape of silence that follows a return. He went to the door and stopped at the bar because rituals matter. Through the glass, Bay 7 looked like Bay 7, patient and blank. He pushed out. The canopy's buzz met him with its jar full of wasps. At the curb, beside the exit crescent, a fresh mark had joined the trio where a front tire would stop when a coach kisses the paint on coming home, a broad, softer shine in the dust, not a line so much as a pressed oval. He crouched and touched a fingertip to the edge. Grit lifted clean, like a place that had carried weight, and then decided to be ordinary again. The chain at Bay 7 did a small thing. One slack link lifting and letting go, not a sway, not a rattle, just the motion a knuckle makes when a person clears a handrail for a second to pass a bag. He waited. The validator inside did not chirp. The kiosk did not cut paper. A part of him missed the little proof. Another part understood that returns rarely ask to be counted. He eased to the spot where a front door would square if there were one. The air had the shape of a doorway, which is different from wind. He felt a sleeve ghost his left shoulder the careful way people do when they remember crowds. He held still the way you do when the aisle is narrow and only manners keep the place from failing. The old two-tone step bell touched the night once, then once again. He did not move until both notes had finished their small job. Inside, the kiosk finally allowed a single tongue of paper. No chirp, just the blade's neat kiss. He took it, because that is what his hands knew. UT 139, Bay 7 to Riverspur. He set it with the others and wrote 15 on its edge without pleasure. In dispatch, the vehicle pane showed nothing. Cam 7 gave him the same chalky curb with the pressed oval new among the arcs, like a period added to a sentence the page had been holding for the right moment. He wrote because the night was writing and someone should keep up. Each 139, return implied. Bay 7 curb shows fresh stop mark. No validator admits. PA silent. Chain slight motion observed. He saved. The cursor blinked like a small lighthouse and then calmed. Out under the canopy, the air took back its simple cold. The loose corner of the detour notice lay obedient and flat, as if smoothed by a hand that didn't need to be seen anymore. He let the new slip cool a breath and wrote the 15 without pushing the pen too hard, as if pressure could change the count. The kiosk settled into its idle swim. The PA stayed dark. The clock's red dots gave their small private blink and tipped to 1:40. He went to the glass because the platform always told the truth it could afford. Bay 7 looked like Bay 7 again. Chains slack, paint calm, the tire arcs now a set of notes on a staff. Arrival, settle, exit, and the softer oval of return. 10 feet down, the departure crescent kept its darker sweep. Beyond it, if he didn't stare, a second faint sweep lived where a rear tire would have corrected to square for the drive. He pressed the door bar and stepped out so the cold could say its piece. The canopy's wasps worked their patient jar. The air had lost most of the metal and kept the river. At the curb, a speck of axle grease he hadn't seen lifted a dark shine like a period at the end of a sentence someone thought was over. He crouched. The grit around it wore the small scallops that happen when a wide tire trembles a breath and then decides it won't. He set the pad of a finger to the edge and came away with the clean, old shop smell you only notice if you've washed your hands and it stays anyway. Inside, the validator gave a single, tidy chirp, the first in minutes, followed by the blade's polite kiss. He didn't turn for it. He waited at the chain as if a door were going to open and a hand would appear. Nothing opened. The ceiling speaker remained honest and quiet. Far in the building, some small blower spooled and died, the way a coach's roof unit sighs when a driver bumps the switch by muscle memory. He let the air finish what it had to say and went back through the glass. The slip lay where the kiosk had left it, white tongue cooling. He took it and felt the warmth the way you feel a coin that's been in someone else's palm. 0140 Bay 7 River Spur. He set it with the others and wrote 16 small to keep the shape from bragging. The landline on the shelf rang once, one dry bell, and stilled. He lifted the handset anyway. Dial tone lived there, sane as a hallway light. He put it down. The cradle clicked. He cut for dispatch because a cursor has manners. Cam 7 kept its chalk bright stare. The return oval read truer now, as if pixels had chosen a side. He opened the vehicle pane against his better judgment. The grey dot for 17W flickered once just west of the depot, the place where a coach noses down third to make the last right into the gate, then went thin and out. The system wrote a line without a keyboard, 0141, trip near depot. Operator, SYS. He watched the letters stop making sense and then make sense again because they fit too well. Back in the lobby, the kiosk hid its idle fish and offered the grey page as if it were tired of pretending. Trip 17W. Stop log. The list walked itself with the politeness of a receipt. Bay 7. Dwell 0139 Depot Gate. Pass. The next line flashed a stubborn word and then let him read it. Bay 7 Final. A tail of type followed, quick, neat. Sawan 42. Farebox open. Sawan 42. Last ticket. Sawan 43. Farebox closed. The page flinched like it had blushed and slid back under the idle logo, ashamed of its own candour. He put both hands flat on the counter. The laminate gave him its unremarkable chill. At his right palm, grit lay in a small, perfect circle, the trace a coin leaves when it spins out and dies. He lifted his hand and the circle stayed, complete, as if whoever had spun it had done so with care not to smudge the end. He went to the glass because the platform held whatever the night let go. Bay 7's chain lifted half a link and settled, less motion than intention. The air at the door square touched his left sleeve with the politeness of someone turning sideways to pass. He did not move. 2 tones sounded, as gentle as the step bell in an older coach, then the tiny tug of a pull cord, a soft, elastic ping that belongs to a yellow line run along a ceiling. He heard it once, then again, then not at all. The validator did not chirp. The PA did not speak. The clock slid to 1:44. He pushed out to the curb and looked down the lane toward the west gate. Bar down, chain through. Chalk line carried its same fine bite. The orange loot box kept its green like a night watchman, with no stories. He turned back to Bay 7 beside the pressed oval on the curb. A new mark had joined the diagram, a narrow, straight shine across dust, exactly where a farebox shelf would line up with a pocket if a pocket had put down a card, then slid it away. It was nothing. It was exact. He went in and pulled the slip the kiosk had printed without asking permission, earlier than he had cared to look. The words were the same size as the others but stood heavier for knowing their neighbours. Each 142, last ticket, bay 7. He set it on top of the stack as if that were the only place it could go and did not number it. The room, honest and ordinary, held its breath like a coach idling in neutral, waiting for a door to close that wasn't open. He left the last ticket, bay 7, on top of the stack, and let the ledger stay open to the line he hadn't numbered. The kiosk wore its idle swim like nothing had noticed him. The PA panel kept its red eye shut. The clock's dots blinked their small vow and slipped to 1:45. He went to the counter drawer because habit wanted a form to hold. The drawer gave its wooden slide thump and offered the packet every shift ended on waybill, closeout, white, canary, pink. He didn't need it. He took it anyway and laid the white sheet beside the tickets, the canary under it, the pink last. He wrote the date and the station code in a careful hand that could have been anybody's. Operator line he left blank. Coach number line he left blank. Route he would have left blank, but his hand wrote 17W without asking him first, the numbers landing on the line with the neatness of a person who'd practiced them. A small noise touched the room from the back hall, a light printer's dry walk, the thin of ink chatter the adding machine made when it rolled its tape. It shouldn't have been rolling now. He followed the sound, past the shade at window 2 and the bent clip, into the little revenue alcove where the audit calculator lived. The door was open, the inch janitors leave for cords. The green display glowed 0.0 and then counted like a child learning, 0.25, 75, 1.0. The paper tape fed itself 3 inches, typed a clean line, bay 7, 0142, last, then stopped. No finger sat on the keys, the machine smelled faintly of warmed dust. On the counter beside it, the coin funnels, heavy metal cones nobody loved, sat nested wrong, smallest on bottom, as if someone had thought about stacking them and changed their mind in the act. He set them right with the soft clink that belongs to tools you've known too long. The room exhaled its stale rubber smell and went still. Back in dispatch, the terminal had drawn new lines without consulting his hands. 0144, trip close. 0144, box sealed, operator, SYS. There was a spot for cashier, a blank for a signature the daytime window always filled. He typed because pretending you can keep up is better than standing still. 0146 audit tape printed last entry, closeout stamps auto-populated, no cashier present, saved. The screen accepted him with the politeness of a clerk who won't remember your face. He walked the corridor past Lost and Found and glanced in without unlocking. The rubber-banded stubs he'd seen earlier had moved half an inch toward the edge of the shelf, not enough to swear, enough to see. He marked the box they sat in with a thumbnail nick he could check later and kept going, because picking up paper to make it behave had started to feel like asking water for proof. In the lobby, the stack of admits sat like a small-bound thing. He lined the edges and slid the waybills white under them, the canary behind that, the pink last, so the forms made a sandwich a person could hand to a cashier who wasn't here. He wrote the summary line the way the day shift did. So 121, row 144, 1, trip. 16 admits. 8, then left the currency field blank, because there hadn't been a draw, only numbers and sounds. Through the glass, bay 7 looked like furniture again. The curb diagram held, the arrival parenthesis, the settle arc, the exit crescent, the pressed oval of return. 10 feet down, the darker sweep to the lane kept its answer. The chain lay patient. The air at the door square when he stood in it had no shape at all, only night. The landline rang once, its one unhelpful bell, then stilled. He lifted the handset anyway. Dial tone carried the civilized hiss he preferred to most people. He set the receiver sideways on the cradle, off hook, to make the tone live in the room, something warm to stand inside of. He went to the time clock by the employee door, because that was where nights usually say they're done. The little LCD read 1:48 in unbothered grey. The cleaner's sign-in sheet still wore the careful hand he had slid into his pocket earlier. R. Spur 051. Only now the duplicate kept at the clock had a twin line below it in the same tight script. R. Spur 0144. The pen on its twine knocked once against the metal and swung, counting nothing. He stood very still until the pen settled. On his way back, he paused in the vestibule window and put his palm flat to the glass. Cold gave him back the truth glass always gives. Out at Bay 7, where a front bumper would nose the paint if a front bumper existed just now, a clear stripe had appeared across the dust, narrower than a tire, not a shoe, exactly the width of the polished metal shelf on an old fare box when it kissed the curb to make change easier. It lay there straight as a ruler, and then, while he watched, blurred one hair, and was the platform again. The clock slipped to 1:49. The dial tone hummed its civilized hum, steady as a line on a page no one had signed. He left the dial tone talking to the room and took the short hall past the mop sink to the revenue door. The badge reader lagged, then gave its tired green. The bolt thunked with the same dry certainty as always. Inside, the count room kept its low ceiling and its smell, rubber bands, old paper, the coppery ghost of coins. The safe sat in the corner like a quiet appliance that remembered louder jobs. Its electronic face blinked a dot every 2 seconds, patient as a metronome. He keyed the first half of the code and set his hand down because opening a box for nothing felt like inviting nothing to write its name. He looked instead at the drop slot where day shift clerks fed their sealed bags. A tamper strip wrapper, red cellophane with white hatching, lay folded once on the floor, as if someone had started to pocket the trash and forgot halfway. He picked it up. The adhesive side wore a faint grey rub. The transfer a strip leaves when it kisses metal and peels. On the counter, the closeout kit plastic tote he rarely touched after midnight waited with its square of blue painter's tape across the lid, last week's tidy. The tape had been lifted and smoothed back, not torn, just pressed again by a thumb that knew where the first crease had lived. He peeled it, opened the lid, and found the expected: blank waybills, spare pens, tamper strips in their red wrappers, 2 empty deposit bags with serials printed down their spines. One bag lay open with its zipper mouth a 1/4 inch unzipped, as if someone had checked it for being empty and decided that was enough truth for the night. He wrote the serials in the margin of his notebook without a plan, and the act made the room behave. He put the tote right, smoothed new tape across the lid, and pressed the seam once. Behind him, the safe's dot blinked, indifferent. On the wall, the money counter, old, beige, honest, sat under a dust cover. He lifted the cover's corner and let it fall. The belt smell, faint, rubber-tired, came up and settled. He checked the coin scale for no reason beyond hating the idea of not checking. Its LCD read 0 coins like a blank page that wasn't offended. He pulled the door and let the latch find itself. In the corridor, the adding machine out by dispatch woke with a dry clatter and fed another small tail of tape. He followed it, because he was the kind of man who followed machines when they asked, and watched the digits print a tidy echo. 0149, Bay 7, close. The machine stopped, content with its repetition. He tore the tape and folded it once into his pocket with the serial numbers, Paper-Keeping Paper Company. In the lobby, the dial tone still warmed the air like a hum you could stand inside. He set the receiver down proper, and the room's silence clicked back into place. The waybill stack with "Last Ticket" on top held it square. He tapped the corners and felt the small pride of straightening a thing that did not need him. Through the glass, Bay 7's diagram of arcs and ovals looked like a chalkboard lesson someone had finished 10 minutes ago. He went out and stood in the door square. The air had shed its metal and kept its river. At the curb, the narrow polish line, the width of a farebox shelf, had gone back to ordinary dust. He rose on his toes and looked down the lane toward the west gate. Bar down, chain through, chalk line still kissed by a fine bite that refused to deepen. The validator, quiet a while, chirped once, modest, followed by the small kiss of the blade. He did not hurry. He let the cut finish, then crossed in, lifted the tongue, and read it because reading was what made a night hold still. 0152, Bay 7, River Spur. He laid it with the others and did not number it. The count had stopped meaning more than a shape. He went to dispatch to see if the system wanted the last word. The terminal had written 3 lines while he'd been down the hall. 0150, finalized trip. 0151, report print. 0152, station clear, operator SYS. He stared at station clear until the letters lost edges and then gained them back. The PA panel stayed dark. The camera grid held its chalk and its patience. On cam 7, the pressed return oval looked like a shallow breath put back into a chest. He typed because ink could be ballast. 0154, count room intact, no unauthorized drops. System posted, station clear, single extra ticket printed. 0152, saved. The cursor blinked once, then steadied. The building answered with the small domestic sounds places make when they remember what they are. A heater relay touching in somewhere above the break room, a pipe ticking in the wall, the exit sign buzzing its low green hymn. Out at Bay 7, the chain did not lift. It had learned, like everything else tonight, how to sit still without promising it would stay. He let station clear sit on the dispatch screen a moment longer, then stood because sitting made the word feel too final. The clock's red dots blinked into 1:55. He took the broom from the janitor cove, old wood handle, soft ends, because end-of-shift hands want a tool. In the lobby, he started at the far bench and drew a slow stripe toward the door, the bristles whispering over grit. The line gathered black crumbs and paper salt, nothing shaped like a shoe. By the kiosk base, the dirt braided itself into a small coil, like a coin had spun down and quit. He pushed it into the pan, and the sound it made was the sound dust makes, a dry hush. He glanced at the stack on the ledge. Last ticket, Bay 7, still sat on top like a lid. He squared the corners with one tap. The waybill copy under it left a faint pressure ghost on the canary, where the words "last ticket" lived, the kind of dent paper keeps even after ink forgets. He slid the canary down 1/2 inch to keep the dent from landing on the same place twice. At window 2, he raised the crooked shade to even, set the bent clip straight, and locked the hatch. The monitor there had returned to its saver, a soft float of logo. He hit the corner key to see if the stop log would admit itself again. It didn't. Sales. Window 2 held still and polite. The trash ring under the counter breathed the faint sweet of paper dust and nothing else. The coin at the stool wheel notch was gone. He knelt and ran a finger in the seam. Clean, like a thing taken on purpose, not kicked. He worked the corridor next. At the break room window, the microwave held 156 in steady green. The lost and found door was tight in its frame. He didn't unlock it. He checked the mark he'd scratched in the box earlier. The box had slid back the 1/2 inch he had noticed before, as if shelves settle by their own math. He swept the hall tile and found the usual lint, a blue thread from a cleaning rag, the corner of a transfer someone had torn months ago. He pushed out under the canopy to walk the bays with the broom across both hands like a rail. Bay 5, chain up. Bay 6, chain up with a lazy sag. Bay 7 chain set the way he'd left it, links, quiet. The curb diagram had stopped changing, the arrival parenthesis, the settle line, the exit crescent dark enough now to read from 10 feet, the pressed oval of return soft as a thumbprint. He brushed nothing because there was nothing a broom should disturb. 10 feet down, the chalk of the mechanic's gate line still wore the fine bite, and no more. He went to the west gate anyway, bar down, chain through, orange loop box on green, patient, idle. He set 2 fingers on the bar and pressed, not to lift it, but to feel if metal can lie. It gave him back the right answer. None. Inside again, he set the broom back in its cove and checked the PA panel. Red LED dark, the talk bar cool. He pressed it once to hear the bed hum return and let it go. No voice followed. The validator gave one last well-behaved chirp, then the blade's small kiss. He took the tongue and read it without hurry. A 157, Bay 7, River Spur. He added it to the stack and didn't number it. Counting had stopped making a shape he trusted. Dispatch had written 2 more lines while he'd been at the gate. 0156, lights, setback. 0157, night mode. Operator, SYS. The camera grid dimmed its borders the way it does after hours, little kindness to eyes. Cam 7 still held its chalk-bright strip. Only the brightness felt like memory now, not noon. He typed because the rope should have a knot at this end. 0158, sweep complete, bays secure. Kiosk printed 1 final slip. System in night mode. Saved. At the cleaner's time clock, the duplicate sheet stayed where it had been. Twin lines in the tight hand. R spur, or 051 and R spur, or 144. Unchanged, which was somehow worse than if they'd moved. He left them. The pen on its twine tapped the metal 1 soft beat and rested. He did the door tours last. Front lock turned, deadbolt seated, check. Side staff door, check. Revenue, green LED, steady, bolt set. In the lobby he lifted the phone and settled it proper in the cradle so the dial tone could go back to being a private thing inside the line. The clock slid to 1:59 with no ceremony. He stood by the glass and looked at Bay 7 one more time, because that is what a person does before signing their name. The chain did nothing. The air at the door square was only night, with a small, plain river smell. On the ledge beside his forms, a single quarter lay he hadn't set there. State side up, nick across the eagle, edge clean of dust, as if a palm had decided the count needed a period and left one. The clock tipped to 2 without asking anyone's permission. He turned the key for the lobby lights to set back, and the rooms softened the way rooms do when they want you to go. The soda machine kept its calm blue. Exit signs kept their little sermons. He gathered the stack, waybill on top, last ticket, Bay 7 facing up, and slid an elastic around the bundle so the paper would feel like one thing. The quarter on the ledge watched him, state side up. He put it on top of the stack as if punctuation should travel with the sentence. He walked the glass once more. Bay 7 belonged to night again. No shine on dust, no fresh arcs, only the tidy diagram the floor had chosen to keep. Arrival parenthesis, settle line, exit crescent, the soft pressed oval that meant return. Beyond the canopy, the river sat in the air like a flat taste. He pressed the bar and stepped out because leaving without looking felt wrong. Under the lamps, the platform carried less noise and more shape. He stood in the door square and let nothing happen near his left sleeve. The chain at Bay 7 gave no link lift at all. He crouched, touched a knuckle to the curb, where the pressed oval had been at its darkest. Grit lifted. The skin smelled faintly of axle, old, as if a story can dry and still not go away. From inside, the phone he'd set right earlier rang its single, dry bell. He went in and lifted the handset. Dial tone stood there, steady, human, unbothered. He set it down. The cradle clicked like a small decision. Dispatch had decided too. On the terminal, night mode wore its grey calmly, but the system had added a new line at the bottom of the route log, the type polite, as always. Tout sage, station secure. Operator SYS. A second line blinked on and then sat as if it had planned to be there all along. 0202 report sent. To who? The box didn't say. He typed because ink is a rope even when there's nothing to pull. So 202, final sweep, verified, Bay 7 unchanged. Lights to setback. Report auto-distributed. Saved. At window 2 he checked the crooked shade he'd straightened. Even. The bent clip stayed where he had told it to stay. On the glass, the 3 small ovals at customer height he'd wiped earlier had not returned. In the trash ring, the liner still clung to the seam from when it had been lifted and let go. Clean is a kind of story too. He took the incident ledger back to the counter and finished the line he'd left floating. 01210144, 1 trip. Admits observed, close-out artifacts recorded, no boarding visual. He signed his name in the small, tidy way feet learn from tile. Not big, not proud, just readable in a good light. The pen left a dot at the end because pens do. The ceiling speaker, quiet since the last civility, gave a single hush. No bed hum, no open line, only the breath of a channel touching on and off. Then the old voice, worn softer by whatever distance it lives behind, offered one last line that didn't belong to his files. End of line. Not a route name, not a stop, a sentence. It faded like warm air in winter and did not return. The PA panel's LED stayed dark and innocent. He looked at the kiosk because machines like to confess when you think they're done. The idle fish swam its lazy lane. He held 2 keys together to open the status pane. Nothing clever surfaced, no ghost log, no grey page. The printer did not test itself. On the metal base, a thin loop of grit drew a near-perfect circle, the kind a coin makes when a person spins it careful to keep it on its edge. He looked at his stack on the ledge, coin on top, elastic around the bundle, and knew he had not set anything down here to spin. He took the stack in both hands anyway, because leaving paper behind felt like leaving a door ajar. He slipped the bundle into the inside pocket where forms had learned to ride, and patted it once so the corner wouldn't catch on the seam. The weight sat right against his ribs, a small, flat proof. He did the front lock last. He turned the key, felt the deadbolt throw, and tugged the bar the way training teaches. Set. He checked the side staff door. Green LED steady, bolt sunk. At the cleaner's clock he let himself look once more. 2 tight lines kept their times. R spur, 051 and R spur, 144. No third entry, which somehow felt like the neatest parting the night could offer. At the vestibule he paused, palm flat to the narrow window. Cold glass gave back only his shape and the canopy's patient tubes. Out at Bay 7 the chain did not lift, did not fall. On the curb the diagram held like chalk under a clear coat. He breathed, counted to 4, and let the door swing shut until the latch found itself with a polite, final sound. Behind him the building kept its small domestic noises, the heater relays click, the exit signs low him. In front of him the lot answered with the blank, safe nothing of after-hours asphalt. He set his keys in their pocket and stepped into 204 like you step off a bus at your stop, not because you trust the night, but because you know your feet. He took the steps slow, the way feet learn after long nights, and let the vestibule door ease itself into the frame. The lot had the safe, blank sound of after-hours asphalt. Sodium lamps laid pale islands over parking stripes. Beyond them, the river made its flat taste in the air with nothing to show for it. He checked his keys by touch, flat fob, brass house, depot clover, then put his hand down. No hurry had earned him anything tonight. He walked the curb edge in front of the building like he always did, habit arguing for one last fact. At the west gate, the bar stood down, chain through, the orange loop box keeping its steady green like a night watchman, with no stories left. The chalk line across the drive wore the same fine bite, not deepened, not healed. On the far side of the bars, 3rd Street's signal worked its private cycle for an empty intersection, red to green to yellow, no cars to deserve it. He let the fence take him along the riverside. Weeds leaned one way and stayed, as if a draft had passed earlier and chosen not to return. The mill's black backs across the water looked like cardboard cutouts against their own darkness. He stood a moment and listened for a train that didn't commit, then walked on. His car sat where he'd left it, nose at a pole, the hood freckled with old sap, nobody buffed. He opened the door, and the dome light raised a small yellow tent. The cabin held nothing new, coffee lid from before midnight, safety vest folded on the rear seat, a half roll of blue tape for when tape mattered more than cents. On the console lay a coin he recognized by the nick through the eagle. He had put a quarter on top of his stack inside. This one wore the same scar, only softer, as if 2 coins had been cousins. He lifted it, turned it twice, and set it in the ashtray without drama. He did not start the engine. He took the flashlight from the glove box and walked the front of the building again, light down along seams, because a beam can teach a thing to tell you its story. At Bay 7, the curb looked like chalk under clear coat. Arrival parenthesis, settle line, exit crescent, pressed oval of return. Nothing added, nothing erased. He set the light low and the dust flashed back in mica, ordinary as a sidewalk. He let the beam wander to the pole, where the old detour flyer had learned to behave. The corner lay flat, tape strings thin and honest. Through the glass he could see the dim of night mode on dispatch, the kiosk's idle fish drifting its soft lane, the ledge where the waybill stack wasn't anymore because it was against his ribs. In the reflection on Bay 7's plexi, the canopy tubes made their patient white bars. For a breath, one bar lengthened the way a windshield lengthens when you stand wrong in light. He leaned a hair to change the angle and the bar went back to tube again, chaste and ordinary. At the west gate, he shone his light into the loop's saw-cut rectangle. Dust lived in the groove, just like it had lived before, unsmudged by tire or shoe. A spider strand ran from the gate's lower rail to the post and took the beam like a wire. He watched it a second, happier with this proof than with any screen. He circled the back lot once more out of respect. 3 noses, 1423, 1419, 1398, kept their angles. On 1423's stepwell behind glass, the coin he'd noticed earlier still lay against the ribbed mat, set like a marker by a careful hand. He didn't unlock, he didn't need to. He let the beam find the fare box's sleeping mouth, amber dead, and dropped the light. The coach gave back the even cold of metal that's been honest for hours. A sound tried the night behind him then. A 2-part sigh, deep and polite, the kind doors make when they ease shut against a seal. He did not swing the light. He stood and counted to 4, the way you count for yourself when counting has turned out to be the only thing that behaves. The air at his left sleeve cooled and warmed in a narrow stripe, the exact size of a person passing with their bag tucked close, so no one has to move. He let the space have right-of-way and watched nothing go by, careful not to step into it. He clicked the flashlight off and the lot returned to its small, square truths. At 3rd Street, the signal went yellow for nobody, then red for nobody, then green. He let that tiny civility belong to the night and walked back toward his car. The stack under his jacket rode flat and sure against his ribs. He put a hand there once without meaning to, and the elastic under the cloth pressed a little half circle into his palm, the shape a coin makes when a story decides to end with punctuation instead of answer. He slid in behind the wheel, closed the door, careful, and sat with the engine off while the clock on the dash found 2:10 with no need of him at all. He let the dash clock claim 2:11 and kept the engine off a few breaths more to see if quiet would name itself. It didn't. He started the car and the dome light surrendered its yellow tent. The fan gave a small tobacco of dust and found level. He eased out of the slot, nose toward 3rd, because home lived that way, and so did the posted path of 17W before the bridge closed. At the west gate, he stopped a courteous car length shy of the bar, chain through, bar down, orange loop box on its patient green. Knight's favourite sentence. He idled there anyway, eyes on the saw-cut rectangle in the lane. Dust lived in it, like evening had put it to bed on purpose. He pictured the chalk bite across the depot drive and the pressed oval at base 7 and told himself, lanes are only choices you keep making. He turned right on 3rd. The signal gave him green he hadn't earned. Storefronts wore their interiors like postcards, dark counters, a fishbowl of chairs at the barber, a pharmacy aisle bright as a hallway to nowhere. He held the speed his hands had memorized from day shifts and watched the river of glass to his left. In the windows, his car's shape slid along with the canopy tubes he'd just left. Beside his reflection, another long pail sat down in the glass, a rectangle with corners soft as breath on a cooler, and kept pace for half a block before it thinned to nothing. He lifted his foot an ounce and let the road decide who was pacing whom. At Cedar, a shelter sat under a sodium lamp, glass tagged with old white marker, the bench a practice in splinters. The route flag still thought 17W existed. Nobody had told metal. He rolled past with his window cracked an inch. From the shelter's tiny speaker, left to sleep since the bridge, 2 tones brushed the air, not proud, just polite. He could have called them wind rattling the grill if the notes hadn't fallen in that exact old step interval. He kept going and didn't write the sound down, which is not the same as not hearing it. His radio on the seat grumbled its small prairie and then cleared to a thin band of nothing, as if a hand had lifted off a push-to-talk somewhere he didn't owe a name. He thumbed it off, then on. The boot chirp sounded like it always did, honest and stupid. He set it face up and let the screen say, "No Tiichia." Past the fairgrounds turnoff, he found the long view of the bridge blacking its silhouette against itself. Detour barricades on the feeder ramp wore dirty reflectors like tired eyes. The arrow boards sulked with only one chevron lit. He pulled into the lane that would have fed coaches onto the approach and stopped at the cone line. The river below didn't show itself, only remembered you when the air said flat water. He put the car in park without meaning to chase anything, and watched the empty ramp seam upward into dark. On the down slope of the guardrail, a paper square had caught in the wind the way paper does, corner lifted, then laid, then lifted, and settled finally with its printed side up. He eased forward until his headlights took it. A waybill copy, canary. The words had ghosted through from a hard pen on white. All 1310144. Wason trip. 16 admits. And then the field where currency would live, left blank. He could have sworn the corner wore a pressure dent where last ticket had once laid on top. He killed the headlights a second to see if taking light away would make the thing less itself. It did not. He stepped out, and the bridge's quiet climbed into his coat like cold. The canary sheet didn't run when he lifted it. Behind him, down on Third, a bus stop banner 2 blocks back lifted and settled twice with no car to claim the draft. He laid the paper on the passenger seat without smoothing it. When he got back behind the wheel, his dash clock found 2:16. The radio, which he hadn't touched, gave 2 tones that weren't its tones, the old step bell notes, gentle as a courtesy. The sound didn't come from the speaker so much as arrive at the windshield and stand there until it decided it had been heard. He put the car in drive because forward is the only gear that moves at night, and pointed his nose toward Mill Road, where the spur loop would be if the map still meant what maps mean. He took Mill Road slow, the way brakes like at that hour, and let the lane lines lead him where the map would have led a coach. Warehouses shouldered the dark with their dock lamps sleeping. The mills kept their backs to the river like old dogs. He rolled past the fenced yard that used to hold pallets of something sweet. Tonight it held only shadow, stacked on shadow. A turnoff carried the small metal sign that never learned it was retired. Spur Loop, buses only. He put his blinker on because manners keep places from forgetting themselves, and eased in. The loop was just asphalt with paint, a circle smashed into a corner of night. He pulled to the outside and let the engine idle. His headlights made the curb look newer than it was. He killed them, and the loop settled into its own light, which was almost none. In the glow from a far pole, the curb under the stop stencil showed a shallow, broad shine, the kind a wide tire leaves when it fits itself to the paint and waits. He got out and crouched with 2 fingers near the edge. Dry grit said ordinary. The shape said lately. He stood in the place where a bus front would have squared, nose to the white. Air there felt arranged, like lines laid down for feet and a doorway. He heard the 2 polite tones he had learned to name all night. The step bell, only thinner now, as if distance had pulled the notes through a long pipe and given them back smaller. Farther off, from the mills or from nothing, something clinked like coins, settling in a throat where coins did not live. He stayed until the clink turned into a pipe cooling the way pipes cool, because the head needs the mercy of a reason. By the loophole, a schedule box wore a cracked plexiglass front and a fogged card behind it. He wiped the inside of the glass with his sleeve, like that would matter from the outside. The listed times didn't include 1:21 or 1:44 or any of the night's new minutes. He touched the box's metal lip with a knuckle, cold, honest. On the pavement near the pole, the wind had stapled a canary sheet against a seam. He toe-tapped it free. Blank, no lines, no hand. The colour made his pocket remember the stack. He folded the paper once and slid it into the console with the other canary he'd found at the bridge. They made a quiet companionship without explaining themselves. He drove the loop once like a coach would, slow, mirror imaginary, hands doing the small square corrections lanes teach. At the egress, his dash clock found 2:23. He let Mill Road take him back toward Third, and did not look in the rear view when the 2 soft tones, door open, door close, slid across the car from nowhere and went out the side glass like breath. 3rd Street at that hour has a way of pretending it belongs to morning. He took the long green and did not stop at the shelter under the sodium lamp, though the little speaker there kissed the air with the thinnest version yet of the bell he had been carrying. At the feeder to the bridge he did not pull in. The barricades sat where they sat. The arrow boards sulked. He drove on. He turned into the depot lot because going home without finishing where he started had never been a good trick. The building kept its small hymns, exit signs, heater relays, a soda machine blue behind setback. He keyed the staff door, green, thunk, and walked the short hall to the lobby the way a person walks back into a room to make sure the stove is off, even when they know it is. Night mode kept its grey. Cam 7 held its chalk-bright calm. The curb diagram at bay 7 in the vestibule window's wash looked sealed like chalk under a thin, clear coat. Arrival parenthesis, settle line, exit crescent, pressed oval of return. Nothing new, nothing erased. On the kiosk base, a near-perfect ring of grit sat where a coin had once taught the floor a circle. He could have sworn the loop was cleaner in one short arc, as if a finger had corrected the circle's wobble and stopped. He put his hand flat on the counter and left it there until laminate gave him back its ordinary chill. He opened the ledger to the last line and let his pen make the only sentence available. No 229, station secure, no further anomalies. 17 WU artifacts retained. He signed the way names are signed when nobody is asking. Small, legible, not proud. He slid the elastic bundle deeper into the inside pocket until paper found rib and settled. On his way out, he paused in the door square and waited for someone polite to pass his left sleeve. Nothing did. The chain at bay 7 did not lift its half-link. The air smelled only like night with a river folded into it. He locked what locks ask, checked what checks forgive, and stepped into the lot. Third cycled a lonely green. A train somewhere decided against its horn. He stood with keys in his hand and listened to a place be a place again. In the silence, two faint tones reached him from the direction of neither bridge nor loop. Steps on a doorway he could not draw any more if he tried, and then were gone, not like a door closing, but like a coach at time, not louder than the night, just exactly on it. He put the keys in his pocket and left on footfall quiet, the way a rider steps down at their stop when the hour is what it is and the lane belongs to nobody but the line. Thanks for staying with me tonight. I'm keeping the lamp low and closing the log here. Before we end, add your city and local time to the night map and tell me what you're listening on, TV, phone, or something stranger. I post new stories nightly, same slow pace, details in order. If you've got a late shift memory or a small true moment, leave it in the comments, no names needed. If you're drifting off, perfect. I'll leave the room how I found it. If you're still awake, tap subscribe and the bell, then pick the next route on the end screen. Sleep easy.